It is 10 p.m. on the East Coast, and we have had poll closings just right now in Iowa, Montana, Nevada, and Utah. In terms of NBC News characterizations of these states, in Iowa, in the presidential race, NBC News is characterizing this race as too early to call, but President Obama is in the lead in Iowa. In the state of Nevada, it is also being described as too early to call, but again, President Obama in the lead in Nevada. In the state of Utah, Mitt Romney is the projected winner in the state of Utah. NBC News projecting Mr. Romney in Utah. NBC News also projecting Mr. Romney as the winner in the great state of Montana. In terms of other states that we are still waiting for a call on, states that we can give you an indefinite characterization at this point. In Florida, it is too close to call. In all-important Ohio, it is too close to call. In North Carolina, it is too close to call. Also in the great state of Virginia, it is still too close to call at this hour. In Colorado, it is also too close to call. Now, interestingly, in the state of Arizona, it is too early to call, but NBC News is saying that Mitt Romney is in the lead in Arizona. In Minnesota, it is also too early to call, but President Obama is in the lead in Minnesota. In the state of Missouri, it is too early to call. And again, remember, too early is a different type of call than too close. There's no advantage projected there. It's just that there's not enough information to make a characterization of the race yet in Missouri other than the fact that it is too early. This is the overall map right now in terms of the electoral map. As you see, it's an exact electoral vote tie right now, 162 to 162. In terms of the states that just closed their polls, we do have two interesting Senate races. In Montana, it's the incumbent Democrat Jon Tester, who is defending his seat against Republican Congressman Denny Rehberg. This race is characterized by NBC News right now as too close to call. Also in the state of Nevada, it is not just a presidential battleground, it is a Senate battleground. Dean Heller got that seat after John Ensign left the Senate under extenuating circumstances. Dean Heller and Shelley Berkeley, that race is too close to call in the Senate. In Utah, Orrin Hatch, the senior senator from Utah, he is the projected winner. He has held on to his seat in Utah. That's what we've got right now in terms of races at this hour. Obviously, we're still keeping an eye on all those states that are too close. Florida, Ohio, North Carolina, Virginia, Colorado. We've got too early as the call in Missouri, Minnesota, and Arizona. Arizona, NBC is describing as having a Romney lead. Minnesota is described as having an Obama lead. But one of the things that's turning out to be more interesting than almost anything else tonight is the Senate. Chris Hayes joins us now to understand what the dynamics are right now, what's going on in the Senate. And Chris, what you think this means overall?
I think one of the fascinating subtexts for tonight's election, particularly in the Senate and for American politics in general, has been partisan polarization, particularly what they call asymmetrical polarization, in which Republicans move further to the right than Democrats do move to the left. There's two political scientists who've come up with a score called DW Nominate, in which they rank the Senate from 1 being the most liberal to 100 being the most conservative. And even going into the night, we knew something very important, which was that there was going to be a big hole in the middle of those rankings. Dick Lugar, who was in the 40s or 50s, he's knocked out by Richard Murdoch. We now know that seat's going to go to Joe Donnelly. Who else? Sorry, I'm losing the name. Scott Brown, of course, is right in the middle of there. He loses tonight as well. We also know there's a retirement of Olympia Snowe. She's right in the middle. She will not be returning. Joe Lieberman replaced by Chris Murphy. And so what we know is that we are going to enter a Senate that is more polarized than the Senate we just came from. And what that means is we are going to have an institution that is going to be more prone to dysfunction because it doesn't have the rules to govern itself like a majority body. We increasingly have a mismatch between the way the parties work in the legislative chambers and the way the Senate works as a legislative chamber as a de facto two-thirds or almost two-thirds supermajority body. And there is one new member of the Senate who has a plan to fix that. That's Angus King, the independent who has not announced who he will be caucusing with. He is from Maine, and he made the strange choice to make Senate filibuster reform the center of his campaign. It'll be very interesting to see if there is more momentum in the Senate to really undertake filibuster reform as this trend of polarization increases and as the body grows more dysfunctional.
Chris Hayes, thank you very much for that. You look at Angus King in Maine, and maybe he is a special case, but sometimes he feels like the future right? You think about these guys in a body that is rendered dysfunctional, incapable in some cases of making basic law because of partisan war in that state. You've got one side, the Republican side, that's been very willing to use the filibuster to absolutely shut down the process of the Senate almost completely. Maybe there are more Angus Kings in our future.
Talk about a candidate refusing to ask the central question in a campaign, refusing to answer it. He would not answer the question, who will you vote for majority leader of the Senate? The idea a few years ago that you could possibly run a Senate campaign and win with that was impossible, and now you see the sense it makes in the craziness that's going on.
I remember a TV series based on that concept. Remember that? I think I have Mr. Sterling.
Didn't last very long.
Mr. Sterling. But you know what? He has, let's be honest about it. I mean, Chris didn't mention it, and I guess it's still unofficial, but everybody expects him to caucus as a Democrat. I mean, that's right. The Democratic Party didn't really launch a challenge of it. You have to caucus with one of the two parties. You don't get any committee assignments. There's no seat in the middle unless you want to do nothing as a senator. So
and there's plenty of incentives to be in the president's party in the Senate, as you know, involving U.S. attorneys and appointments, those things.
Well, that's right. You get the privilege. Yeah. You get the senatorial privilege.
Well, there's no doubt that the Republicans are taking a hit tonight in the Senate. And if President Obama wins re-election, he is going to have political capital to turn to the country and say, don't obstruct me.
On that point, we have a call to make in another hotly contested Senate race. In the state of Missouri, NBC News projects that Claire McCaskill, the Democratic incumbent senator from Missouri, has held onto her seat against Republican challenger Todd Akin. This has been a fascinating race from the very beginning. It was an amazing thing that Claire McCaskill won this seat in 2006. She is a good campaigner, but and 2006 was a good year for Democrats, but that was still an amazing and very, very close victory that she won in 2006 at the same time that John Tester won his seat in Montana. Claire McCaskill wanted Todd Akin, among all of the Republicans in the primary, to run against her for that seat. She wanted Todd Akin so badly, she ran ads for Todd Akin with her own campaign money in the primary. She got the candidate she wanted before he even made his comments about legitimate rape.
This could be the birth of the second Barbara Boxer. Barbara Boxer, the most liberal member of the Senate in many ways, wins year after year, every 6 years. Oh, she's going to get caught this time. She's going to get caught this time. She's too liberal. You know, McCaskill's more of a moderate, but here she is winning two races, you pointed out, two races she wasn't supposed to win in a very tough state of Missouri. She may just have what we call luck. Because in the end, sometimes that matters a lot, like General Grant had.
She needed something else to happen when the Akin controversy broke, and that is she needed Akin to stay in. And all the establishment Republicans were trying to push Akin out there, trying to get a better candidate in there, and she played it very cool, and she went low, trying to, and didn't go into big attack mode on Akin at that moment because she needed that guy to hang in there.
I thought I had her booked on my show the day after the thing happened, and that booking disappeared very quickly.
She didn't want to be out there pushing.
She went low key. By the way, she had the tax problem with the airplane before. She had a particular problem in that re-election where she was very vulnerable to a regular Republican.
Speaking of Barbara Boxer, I give her credit for starting the narrative of the war on women. It was a little over a year ago when she really started to talk about this a lot. And I think what we're seeing tonight is the war on women is breaking for the Democrats. Yeah. You've got Elizabeth Warren winning. You've got Claire McCaskill winning. You've got Joe Donnelly winning in Indiana. And you said earlier you didn't think that he would have pulled it off had Murdoch not said what he said in that debate. So I think that the Republicans need to gather at the war table and figure out what their strategy is in the next 2 years, because they're clearly out of step with the middle class, they're out of step with minorities, and they're out of step with women's issues.